Look at this exam paper. Right here is a fatal mistake that is constantly costing Cambridge IT students easy grade boundaries. We are jumping straight into this explainer of the 9626 source material because every second you spend not knowing this trap is a second risking crucial points on your final grade.
Take a look at this real, seemingly simple exam prompt. Explain the difference between data and information. It looks like an absolute freebie, doesn't it? Literally the first thing in the syllabus. But examiner reports consistently show thousands of students dropping the ball right here.
And this right here perfectly illustrates why they lose those marks. Look at this highly flawed answer. Data is numbers and information is what you get from a computer. Ouch. This loses crucial marks immediately because it totally lacks precision and completely misses the core syllabus concepts. But hey, don't worry, by the end of this explainer, we're going to reconstruct this exact mess into a top-band full-mark response.
To really understand why that initial answer fails so spectacularly, we have to look at the exact Cambridge syllabus definition. Now, technically, data is the plural of datum, but more importantly for your exam strategy, data consists of raw characters, symbols, images, or audio clips, which on their own have absolutely no meaning. That's the key word you need to lock in: meaningless.
Okay, let's ground this with a practical example. Just take a look at this sequence of numbers. As it stands right now, this is purely raw data. Why? Well, because it completely lacks context. I mean, we could stare at it all day, but without further explanation, it tells us absolutely nothing useful.
But the exact moment we provide some context and reveal that these numbers are actually Indian postal codes, the whole game changes. The data transforms into meaningful information. Processing that data to give it context is the literal bridge between data and information.
What's really cool is how this principle applies across all sorts of disciplines. Take random Greek and Latin letters, for example, like sigma, rho, or F. They only become information when they're given a mathematical or scientific context. It's only then that we know they actually represent standard deviation, density, or force. Context is quite literally everything. And as the examiner-style feedback in our source text explicitly points out, confusing these two terms is a really fundamental and incredibly common error. If you go into that exam room and write your answers assuming data and information are just interchangeable synonyms, your marks are basically going to vanish into thin air.
So, the natural question is, how do we actually gather this data in the first place? Well, in just a moment, I'll show you the exact examiner clue regarding indirect sources that changes your information technology exam answers completely. But first, you absolutely need the direct data framework that makes that hidden clue completely obvious.
Let's see how this builds up our understanding. Direct data is original source data that's collected for a very specific purpose. For the 9626 syllabus, you need to have these 4 primary collection methods down cold: questionnaires using open and closed questions, formal interviews, physical observation, and automated data logging using things like sensors.
Now, when you're tackling a Cambridge exam question about a data collection scenario, say proposing a new bus route for a local village, you definitely shouldn't just list those methods. Instead, use this 5-step framework to structure your argument: point, evidence, explanation, link, and judgment. This is exactly how we prove to the examiner that we know how to apply the IT theory to a real-world scenario.
For example, let's look at 2 of those methods side by side. If you are physically standing there, timing how long it takes to walk from a new housing development to a bus stop, well, that's direct observation. You're physically watching it happen. But if you use automated door sensors to count the boarding passengers, that is direct data logging. Both are collecting original source data, sure, but the application and the technology used are entirely different.
All right, now for that crucial examiner clue I teased just a minute ago. Take a really close look at this definition of indirect data. This is data obtained from a third party, but here is the absolute most important part you need to remember. It is used for a totally different purpose than originally intended. That distinction right there, that is the exact trap examiners love to lay for you.
Let's actually pause and predict here with a quick spot the error challenge to test our intuition. Out of these 4 options, which one represents indirect data? Think back to what we literally just discussed regarding original purpose versus third-party usage. Is it timing traffic, interviewing villagers, using the electoral register for debt collection, or handing out questionnaires?
If you spotted the electoral register being used by debt collection agencies, you hit the nail right on the head. See, the electoral register is originally collected to maintain a list of adults entitled to vote. So when a debt agency buys the open version of that register just to track down people who owe them money, they're using a third-party source for a completely different purpose. That is textbook indirect data.
Another classic, really high-yield exam example is weather data. It is direct data when the Met Office collects it using their own sensors for their specific purpose of, forecasting the weather. However, that exact same data becomes indirect data the moment a construction company buys it from the Met Office to design a climate-resistant building. The data itself didn't change at all, but the ownership and the purpose did.
Similarly, think about a national population census. This is direct data for the government when they collect it to plan out things like hospitals and public services. But it instantly becomes indirect data when historians look at it decades later to build family trees, or say when police forces analyze it to understand local demographics for crime prevention. It's all about how it's being used.
So, the absolute crucial takeaway here is that context and purpose define your data types. But always remember this for your exam. Utilizing third-party data comes with some immense responsibility. As this quote from the source material highlights, purchasing mailing lists or using the electoral register must always be done within strict legal and data protection boundaries. Examiners absolutely love to award points for mentioning compliance when you're discussing indirect data. Don't forget that.
Okay, let's bring this whole thing full circle and return to that cold open mistake we looked at earlier. We are finally ready to construct the top band answer. We can toss out that vague language and replace it with real syllabus precision. Data consists of raw, meaningless facts. Information is data that has been processed and given context to have meaning. See the difference?
But listen, a top band student never just stops at the definition. To secure those full marks, you have to provide a clear example. You state that a raw number sequence like 110053 is data. But then, explaining that this specific sequence is an Indian postal code provides the context, fundamentally creating information. Boom. That is a bulletproof, top-tier answer.
So you now have the perfect conceptual grasp of data versus information, and you've got the exact framework to back it up. But I want to leave you with a really provocative thought. What if you go in and write that perfect, top-band definition we just built, and you still score an absolute 0 because you missed a hidden trap in the exam prompt?
Because what if the examiner didn't ask you to explain, but actually ask you to evaluate? That one word changes everything. Click the next explainer on your screen right now to discover the hidden command word trap that secretly decides your mark band before you even write a single word. You literally cannot afford to miss it. Subscribe to our YouTube channel Ace the Exams at acetheexams_IGCSE to excel in your Cambridge examinations. Keep learning, and I'll see you over there.